like trying to find a way to sit without like flashing everyone. But the thing is, like, I have such bad eyesight and my camera is pointed so far away from the room that like I can't even see the viewfinder very clearly. And so that's why I never know what I look like. And that's why I never know when my curtains are uneven. Hi, how are you doing? My name is Mina. And honestly, I feel like I have to be kind of transparent. I've just been feeling so terrible the last couple weeks, really the last month or so. I've just been like really, really stressed out. I'm reaching the end of my classes and things are just piling up. I don't know. It really hit me because the other day I posted on my Instagram that I was looking for recommendations on sad media to consume. And the last time I really loved watching back-to-back sad media was when I was in high school. And by the way, what I mean by sad media is just like movies or books that have a tragic ending that make you want to like die. Yeah, the last time I really had that moment in my life where I was like, I want to watch some sad media was when I was in high school, which is always a red flag if I ever want to revisit stuff I was doing in high school. So with that said, if you want to tell me a book that really just like destroyed you, I would love to read it. If you watched a movie that made you never want to leave your bed again, I want to watch it. And it's fine. Like, it's not worrisome at all. It's a phase. It's a phase, mom. Part of the reason why I usually like watching depressing stuff or engaging with depressing stuff when I'm feeling kind of down is because it puts everything in perspective for me. Like, it gives me one, the catharsis to cry, and two, it just makes you like more appreciative. So I was like really into the movie Atonement, and I still am, like, to this day when I think about it. It just brings up a lot of memories for me, and that's why like the first video, my cat just went crazy. That's why the first video on this channel is actually a video about Atonement, because I'm like a stan, like I'm a Joe Wright stan. And anyways, like I literally watched that movie maybe 20 times over the course of like the 4 years I was in high school. So times are dark, but it made me think about how, you know, at least I'm like not drafted for World War II, right? Like things could be worse. Today we're gonna be talking about dolls though. So it's kind of a bright and sunny topic. I feel like in the past couple months, really like the past year, every time Greta Gerwig Barbie news has dropped, the internet has gone completely feral about it. I did a whole podcast episode where I talked about Ryan Gosling's like casting choice and how much I stan that decision, and I will not be hearing any disagreements about that. Ryan Gosling is the perfect Ken. I stand by that. But I just feel like anytime they drop some promotional images or if there's like a new trailer, that's all anyone wants to talk about for like 48 hours. And I already made like a Barbie video, and this was before the Barbie news was even announced. So you can look back at that video if you want to see why everyone loves Barbie to begin with. But I haven't really done a video on dolls before, and specifically like dolls and how they relate to the fashion space. And I thought that could be really interesting because also, oh my God, tangent, I was on Twitter and someone had reposted screenshots of this TikTok, and they were kind of like making fun of this TikToker, but this TikToker made a TikTok that was pretty innocuous. It was like, oh, why don't they ever do like Met Gala themes that are actually fun? Like, why does no one want to do like a Monster High Barbie dolls theme? Why does no one want to do like an Under the Sea theme? And there's some people like on high fashion Twitter who were making fun of that and being like, you guys like don't understand fashion, blah, blah, blah. But it got me to thinking that dolls actually do occupy a pretty large space in fashion history, and they have a significant influence and symbiotic relationship with fashion. And it actually is very academic, and it actually is very cool, and I would love to talk about that today. One of the oldest toys ever found in archaeology was discovered in a child's tomb in Russia, dating to the Bronze Age, which is about 4,500 years ago when early humans were first populating Europe. The doll has a head carved of soapstone and measures a few inches tall. The archaeologists who discovered the doll concluded that it most likely belonged to a young commoner. So there you have it. dolls have gone way, way back. But a lot of these early dolls were made of very rudimentary materials, and it wasn't until the Victorian era when we get to see some actual, technological developments go into the making of these toys. And prior to 1840, few toys were made on a commercial basis to begin with. Most toys were homemade or produced by small local shops and craftsmen. But during the Industrial Revolution, widespread technological advances spurred the growth of factories producing consumer goods and fueled a boom in toy production. New and progressive ideas about the meaning of childhood also rapidly increased the demand for mass market toys. So one of the types of dolls that we got were paper mache dolls, and they became mass produced around 1820. And they were popular because they were cheap and easy to make. Different factories had their own secret formulas that consisted of some kind of mix of scrap paper, glue, clay, gypsum, chalk, black flour, ash, and some other quote-unquote secret ingredients. These dolls were popular for about 30 more years before the porcelain doll took over. There were also wax dolls, and they came in about 3 different types. So the first type is the poured wax doll. These were dolls with molded heads of wax. Some of the heads were solid and others were hollow. The poured wax doll was first introduced in the late 1700s, and they were very desirable for their translucence and more realistic resemblance to human skin. The second type is the wax over doll, which is a less expensive doll with a head of composition, paper mache, or other materials that is then dipped or coated in wax. The third type is the reinforced wax doll. Reinforced dolls came out later than the other two. To make one, first a wax doll head was poured, and then the inside was reinforced by using either plastic or strips of cloth soaked in composition. This provided a stronger support layer to the wax. However, like the paper mache doll, the wax doll eventually did get pushed out of vogue in the late 19th century due to everyone's it girl, the porcelain doll. So let's talk about her. Let's give her the attention that she deserves, right? The first porcelain dolls were made of Chinese porcelain and were called China dolls. The porcelain was glazed to produce a shiny look. Older China dolls had wooden bodies, but from around 1840 to 1880, China was also used to make doll heads, hands, and feet. However, beginning in the 1850s, demand for a more realistic skin tone called for a new technique. France and Germany began manufacturing bisque dolls, which featured unglazed porcelain heads with a matte finish. Unlike the China doll, bisque doll heads were not dipped in glaze before firing, which preserved a smooth skin-like texture. Only the heads were left unglazed, while other parts of the body were made from a variety of other materials to avoid heaviness. The first bisque dolls had molded hair, eyes, and mouths, but later advancements offered a more lifelike quality. Glass eyes that opened and closed, complex wigs made of human or animal hair, and even inset teeth. In keeping with the trends of the Victorian era, many high-quality dolls came with elaborately styled wigs of real hair pinned to a cork pate. Some even had pierced ears or carefully painted feet that featured patterned stockings or trendy boots. The finest porcelain parts were sold separately for home assembly. So, as dolls began to be produced on a larger scale, they also started to represent a lot of societal ideas about gender. In the early 20th century, right around the time that women were increasingly leaving the home and entering the workplace, infant dolls grew in popularity. The first commercially successful infant doll, or Boz Baby, not Boss Baby, Boz Baby.
I'm the boss.
The boss.
Was introduced in 1909 by the doll maker Cameron Reinhardt, based in Waltershausen, Germany. Some of the other popular infant dolls that follow include the Avril Mama doll in 1918, the Bilo Baby in 1922, and the Betsy Wetsy in 1934. The whole point of these dolls was to care for them like they were real babies, thus kind of inducting young girls into the cult of maternity. Betsy Wetsy could even wet herself, which taught girls the valuable lesson in how to change diapers.
Of course, like all little babies, Betsy Wetsy wets and needs to be changed.
Moving into the post-war era, when Barbie was introduced in 1959, second-wave feminists criticized Mattel for promoting an unrealistic body ideal and a hyper-consumerist lifestyle. To reframe Barbie into being a positive role model, Mattel gave her myriad career options that deviated from her original fashion model one, which provided girls with alternative aspirations, like president and rocket scientist, though I think those two professions came much later. Yeah, actually her first, couple jobs include fashion designer, singer, ballerina, flight attendant, nurse, babysitter, cheerleader, candy striper, drum majorette, fashion editor, student teacher. So a lot of very feminine coded jobs, though she was an astronaut in 1965. For boys, action figures were offered as a socially acceptable way to play with dolls, though their macho design has also raised similar concerns about body image. Timothy Baghurst conducted a study in 2006 and found a clear link between the exaggeration of action figures' bodies and a drop in male self-confidence. Baghurst's report also noted that the facial expressions of action figures seem to be getting progressively more aggressive, and that this, coupled with both an increasingly violent media and unstable hormones caused by steroid injections and overexercise, could be permanently damaging not only the physicality but also the psychology of growing boys. Another doll brand that's been under attack for body image issues was Bratz. Bratz were first launched in 2001, and they were kind of immediately criticized because the girls were their designs looked more sexual, I guess, than Barbie. Time columnist Nancy Gibbs wrote in 2006, most critics focused on the clothes, which lean past trendy to trashy. Torn jeans, bare navels, platform shoes, micro skirts with chains. It's easy to imagine that behind those pouting lips lies a pierced tongue. But that's not really the issue. You could strip them naked, re-outfit them from Cinderella Barbie's closet, and still have a problem. It's all in the expression. Heavily made up, they look jaded, bored, if not actually stoned. A father told The New Yorker the same year, the dolls look like streetwalkers. You know, those pumping parties where people go for plastic surgery on the cheap? They look like pumping party victims. However, Dr. Jillian Hernandez, a Black and Latina aesthetic scholar, challenged these Bratz criticisms, saying, I came to realize that Barbie is also a sexual representation. However, Barbie's body is perceived as acceptable due to her whiteness, while Bratz is viewed as unacceptable due to their racial difference. Yeah, Bratz definitely had better representation in their lineup than Barbie. The first 4 that came out, I forget their names. Wait, I think I do remember. It was Jade, Sasha, Chloe, and Yasmin. Is that correct? And in the lineup, I believe Jade, Sasha, and Yasmin are the ones that were people of color. So there was already more representation from the onset compared to Barbie. I personally was a much bigger fan of Bratz than Barbie. I don't know if I owned that many Barbies, but I owned a lot of Bratz. And every Christmas, that's what I wanted. I wanted more Bratz. Like, I could never have enough. And what I really liked about Bratz is because their entire feet came off, which is such like a strange detail to want to buy toys based on. But like Barbie, what always pissed me off was that her little heels would always fall off her shoes because they wouldn't be like they couldn't adhere properly. Whereas Bratz, their entire shoe would just pop off their ankle. So like the shoe also was the foot. And because of that, I never lost the shoes. The one downside to that is like if the Bratz doll came with open toe shoes, then the shoe would also contain like skin color. And if you had Bratz dolls of different skin tones, you couldn't like interchange those particular shoes between them, which also annoyed me because I was really trying to like come up with different outfits and I found that very limiting. But other than that, Bratz forever, Bratz always, and I think the true fashion girlies, we love Bratz. Or maybe I'm just projecting. So Bratz, Barbies, action figures, Monster High, Polly Pocket, infant dolls, like all these toys do implicitly carry some kind of meaning about Western society values, right? Like you can stretch it as much as you want. But American Girl dolls explicitly convey narratives about Western history and culture and society. And yeah, let's talk about American Girl dolls for a second.
I think I know more about American Girl dolls than you do, genius.
American Girl originally produced 6 childlike dolls that represent different historical eras and ethnic groups that make up America. While you could also buy numerous outfits for them, what made the dolls really special was not actually the fashion, but their corresponding books that would give insight on the environments they grew up in, as well as their own personal fictional stories. For a lot of young girls, including myself, these books were probably our first forays into a now long-standing interest in American history. Also, these dolls were like over $100 per doll, and they were big dolls. So It was kind of like a social flex if you had one or more.
Please, 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 please.
I never got my own new American Girl doll. I got a hand-me-down from my cousin, but I remember going to my friend's house and she literally had like 7 American Girl dolls. As a young child, I don't think I really put together that her parents were loaded until I saw that row of American Girls. But these dolls were also imperfect because I feel like when you try to condense an entire period of history into the story of one doll, it's going to lead to an oversimplification and overgeneralization of that era, right? As Abby Snyder writes for the Michigan Daily, these dolls of color cannot begin to embody the complex experiences of the various races and ethnicities they attempt to represent. American Girls aren't the only dolls to convey ethnic cultures, though. Barbie's Dolls of the World line are a collection of 91 dolls that represent different countries and are dressed in cultural garb. And on a less capitalistic level, folk dolls around the world have also been used to preserve historical cultural dress. So what's the relationship between dolls and fashion? Well, because dolls are basically like miniaturized versions of people, it makes them sort of the perfect way to disseminate fashion trends. So I talked a little bit about this in my magazine video that I just put out recently, but Pandora dolls were actually the earliest version of fashion dolls. Also, the term fashion doll is a little bit misleading because dolls are normally associated with children as toys, but fashion dolls are like little mannequins. If you're on the historical fashion side of Pinterest, you've probably come across fashion plates way more often than you've seen Pandoras. And fashion plates were popular, but the problem with fashion plates is that they were flat illustrations, whereas Pandoras were like 3D things. Pandoras, unlike fashion plates, allowed people to see what clothes would actually look like on a body. Clothes were expensive back then, and the ready-to-wear market didn't really boom until the Industrial Revolution or the late 19th century. If you were going to put that much money into a new dress, you wanted to know what it would look like on your body. It's the same kind of mindset that we have now when we try clothes on in a store. It's one thing to look at pictures of clothes on an online store, and it's another thing entirely to actually go and try things on before you buy them. Paper dolls were also a tool for marketing. The exact origin date of them is unknown, but historians have discovered the first Western paper dolls in 18th century Paris during Louis XV's reign, but they've also found paper dolls traced all the way back to 9th century Japan. Paper dolls are two-dimensional figures, and they could represent a vast variety of subjects, such as people, animals, or object. And they were also mostly used as toys for both adults and children. However, early dressmakers also used a version of a paper doll, 8 inches tall with joints made of thread, to design and model clothing, but many of these dolls had permanently printed costumes. Because of how fast you could print paper, paper dolls became a favorite medium for spreading information about fashion trends in the early 19th century. One of the discovered paper dolls of the era were Anne Sander Wilson's 1832 collection because they came with a floating woman's head that you could attach to a number of different outfits. Available clothing that she drew ranged from fashionable dress to working clothes. The paper dolls also came alongside a manuscript called The History of Miss Wildfire, which told Miss Wildfire's story. She used to dress with fancy clothes, then she descended into poverty after the death of her father and was forced to earn her keep as a lace maker. Eventually, she managed to redeem herself with marriage and conversion to Quakerism. Moving on to the 20th century, after World War II, France's fashion industry was basically moot, and that's because of the war. And, because the war was fought in Europe, a lot of things were destroyed, and it was hard to build back any industry. And especially because fashion shows were so expensive to put on, the whole production of them, fashion designers in France were struggling with figuring out how to rebuild their stores and remarket their clothes again. To celebrate the end of the war and the return of French fashion, Robert Ritchie, the son of Nina Ritchie, had the idea to present a miniature fashion exhibit, which could be made thriftily with limited resources. They called this exhibit Théâtre de la Mode, and it opened on the Louvre on March 28, 1945. They recruited 15 other top designers alongside Nina, including Cristobal Balenciaga, Pierre Balmain, Lucien Lelong, Elsa Schiaparelli, and Hermès to create 237 figurines wearing their creations. The mannequins were 27.5 inches tall and were presented in 15 sets built by artists like Christian Berard and Jean Cocteau. Jewelers Cartier and Van Cleef & Arpels contributed miniature necklaces and accessories. As Susan Train, Vogue's former Paris bureau chief, wrote in an introduction for the book Théâtre de la Mode, Fashion Dolls, The Survival of Haute Couture, born at a moment in history and under circumstances that were more than difficult, but in an elan of solidarity and hope for the future, the dolls stood also for the creative ability, skills, and pride in the perfection of detail of the artisans, couturiers, and artists of France. They are, in fact, like the phoenix, a symbol of life. So in the post-war era, we also got a lot of fashion dolls that were being marketed to children, such as Barbie and Sissy. Sissy was released in 1955 by doll maker Madame Alexander. Sissy was revolutionary. She was 21 inches tall and full-figured. Previously, most dolls were made in the likeness of a child, such as Betsy McCall, Ginny, and many others. The idea of creating a more mature doll for children was to create this like big sister character that would guide these children through their teenage years. Barbie was first released in 1959, as I said, by Mattel, and her first look was a striped swimsuit. Although Barbie was targeted to children, the doll's initial inspiration was taken from the German Bild Lilly doll, a German call girl cartoon character who was marketed to adult men. On the suggestive elements carried over from Bild Lilly to Barbie, creator Ruth Handler said, "Every little girl needed a doll through which to project herself into her dream of her future. If she was going to do role-playing of what she would be like when she was 16 or 17, it was a little stupid to play with a doll that had a flat chest. So I gave it beautiful breasts."
Oh, and a fashion doll with big watermelon boobs teaches the right lessons, huh? That's what's going on.
I just want to raise a point and say, Ruth, that some people, some adults, some fully grown adults have flat chests their entire lives. So. However, the close association between dolls and fashion did lead a lot of second wave feminists to get really pissed off, to say the least. Many feminists felt that companies that were producing these dolls, which inevitably had such a significant influence on the development of young girls, should create dolls that had more meaningful aspirations than just getting pink cars and more clothes. In the 90s, actually, The Simpsons episode Lisa versus Malibu Stacy sees the young feminist character appalled by the doll's catchphrases like, "Thinking too much gives you wrinkles," and "Don't ask me, I'm just a girl."
The things she says are sexist. Lisa said a dirty word.
The conflict of this episode was inspired by Mattel's controversial Teen Talk Barbie, which was released in 1992, which infamously spoke phrases like, "I love shopping," and Aqua also released their hit single Barbie Girl in 1997, characterizing Barbie as dumb, materialistic, and less than wholesome, to say the least. However, Billboard's Larry Flick detected a feminist angle in his review of the song, saying, at the same time, she effectively rants about the inherent misogyny of Barbie with a subversive hand. I don't know, but I do know that Mattel did not like Barbie Girl, and I think it's so funny that, like, when Greta Gerwig's Barbie trailer came out, a bunch of people were like, oh my god, this was such a missed opportunity to use, like, the Barbie Girl song for the film's trailer. And I think we have to remember that Mattel signed off on this project. So, no, I don't think that they would have been okay with Barbie Girl being used in their marketing. In fact, Mattel actually sued Aqua's label and distributor for copyright infringement, claiming that the song contained lyrics that associate sexual and other unsavory themes with Mattel's Barbie products. And that happened in September 1997. In fashion runways all around the world, dolls have been significantly referenced by a lot of designers. For example, Maison Martin Margiela's Fall/Winter 1994 collection, titled A Doll's Wardrobe, took direct inspiration from clothing produced for dolls. Margiela enlarged the scale of a 1960s and 70s doll's wardrobe, and so the collection featured oversized fixtures like zips and clasps, large woolen knitwear, and giant pockets on jeans. Loose threads were often left exposed, making the physical construction of the garment an integral part of its overall aesthetic. Jeremy Scott also evoked paper dolls for Moschino's Spring/Summer 2017 runway, playing as always with themes of nostalgia, consumerism, and kitsch. Joanna Elizabeth writes about the collection, "It's all about optical illusions, as dresses, two pieces, and gowns look like cardboard cutouts." He also brought a call to Valley of the Dolls with pill prints and 60s-inspired silhouettes. In the same year, for their 2017 fall show, Victor and Rolf dressed models as life-size dolls with giant heads. The reason behind it? Victor and Rolf describe the dolls as the brand's mascots, rooting for a world that is creative, diverse, and eco-conscious. We thought reality is so weird at the moment, why not show the surreal side of reality? Designers have also designed collections for dolls specifically, the ones that kids play with. The first fashion designer to collaborate with Barbie was Oscar de la Renta. He started working with Mattel in the mid-1980s, creating stylish outfits and sparkling gowns for Barbie. These first creations were sold separately from the dolls as part of the Barbie Fashions line. In 1998, the first Oscar de la Renta doll was released featuring Barbie in an elegant gold dress. But arguably the most popular Barbie designer collaborations are the Bob Mackie creations. Bob Mackie was a major 90s designer. I believe Fran Fine wears a lot of different dresses that are Bob Mackie in The Nanny. And starting in 1990, Bob Mackie partnered with Mattel to create Barbie couture gowns. His designs were incredibly elaborate, featuring headpieces, Swarovski crystals, and hand-sewn sequins. In total, he and Mattel collaborated on over 20 Barbie dolls. Mattel has continued to collaborate with designers in recent years. In 2015, they teamed up with Moschino to create a doll collection that matched the brand's existing collection for women. On the flip side, in January 2022, Balmain collaborated with Barbie for the second time to create a women's clothing line inspired by the dolls. While definitely the doll with the most designer collaborations under its belt, Barbie is not the only one to dip a toe into the fashion industry. Last year, Moalola released a collaboration with Bratz, designing limited edition clothing and accessories for select dolls. Creative director Moalola Ogunlesi tells Hypebae, "Growing up as a tomboy in Lagos, Nigeria, I have always been fascinated by Bratz dolls with their extreme beauty, looks, and out-of-this-world fashion. This collaboration with the brand gave me the opportunity to re-examine the ideals of beauty and femininity and how I could bring Bratz into my world and make them reflect my own ideas of beauty. That's why I'm so excited to work with MGA and the Bratz team in designing and offering these dolls." It's unsurprising that a lot of designers probably grew up playing with dolls or even designing outfits for them. But also on a business front, it's just like a good strategy overall to introduce kids to a specific designer, because even though these children don't have the spending power to buy a Balmain dress, you're introducing what Balmain is so that when they do grow up, they recognize that name and they're like, oh, I really love the little outfits that my Barbie wore. And maybe they're then more inclined to purchase something from Balmain rather than from a brand that hasn't worked with Barbie before. Something we also have to talk about though, and this is like a bit of a pivot from like the whole fashion side, but I think it's important to talk about in how it has contributed to just a revived interest in dolls to begin with, is the American Girl doll hype. Specifically with the meme culture around American Girl dolls, which I'm sure a lot of you have been exposed to. And I'm not going to say against your will, because I think these are generally some of the funniest memes that are circling the internet, and I hope they never go away. So if you haven't seen any of these American Girl doll memes, there's just like a lot of popular meme pages that have been created that are inspired specifically by American Girl, and a lot of them create these images that are both funny and also like political, which is funny in and of itself. But for example, like this one meme is a doll with the phrase "cancel them loans, Biden" overlaid. What is the reason for this particular meme format or this like interest in American Girl doll memes? The owner of the Instagram account, Clitridge, explains, "The American Girl books have always explored identity and what it means to be an American. As a nation, there are different periods where we've had to grapple with American identity and what that means for us. That the past 5 years have been a time that Americans have been put through a lot of stress and had to redefine our thoughts about ourselves." There's also this popular specific meme template, "We need an American Girl who," followed by something relatable yet niche like, "We need an American Girl doll who chewed on her Polly Pocket clothes." Research historian Raquel Gonzalez considers why American Girls have made a comeback among adults, theorizing how doll play shapes identity formation. She writes, "The 'We need an American Girl doll who' meme leans towards individuality too. This personalization also served as a primary selling point for Pleasant Company, as their catalogs encouraged young consumers to dress up and role play as their doll of choice."
Let's look at my choices. We got to match kind of hair color.
Right.
I also want a doll that, like me, has some skin damage and is prone to depression.
And finally, back to Barbie, or Greta Gerwig's Barbie, which has been the latest catalyst for fashion doll interest, or doll interest in general. I feel like Greta Gerwig's Barbie has simultaneously pulled in people who have been staunchly like anti-doll and who think that this movie is going to be actually very cynical and satirical about the entire doll industry and people who love dolls and who specifically like love Barbie, and they feel like this movie is bringing back nostalgia. And I think that's really interesting. I think Greta Gerwig has done a really good job, and particularly like the marketing team for this movie has done a really fantastic job in generating public interest in it. But I also think it's just like a lot of things have come together. For instance, Greta Gerwig is a very accomplished director. The cast is absolutely stacked. We've never had a Barbie live action movie before, despite Barbie being such a huge phenomenon. But I think what definitely has created the hype around Barbie is the mystique around it. Like, no one really knows what it's about, but all the promotional material that's come out so far has been leaning on like kind of ironic, self-aware humor. For instance, the promotional poster for Michael Cera's character, he plays Alan, and the tagline for his poster is "There's only one Alan," and that refers to how over the years Barbie and Ken have been reinterpreted so many times, but they only created one Alan doll. And so that's just an example of a self-aware joke that they're playing on the audience. And then there's also my favorite line in the new trailer that just dropped a couple months ago.
I thought I might stay over tonight.
To do what?
I'm actually not sure.
And maybe I'm biased as someone who did grow up with dolls and who really loved playing with dolls. I loved dolls, but I also loved to read, and I also loved Pokemon. I wanted to say video games, but that's a lie. I didn't love video games. I only loved Pokemon. And therefore, I was a girl of multifaceted interests. And no, I did not like sports. It's something I will never like in my life. But I think I turned out okay. And I understand a lot of people who are anti-doll and who think it's just like a frivolous, like little girl interest, because I do think there's some things that I've probably internalized from growing up with dolls, like, you know, my love for fashion, but particularly on consuming fashion, probably has to do with how I loved styling those dolls and how I loved purchasing new clothes for them. So I think that's definitely a downside, but I also think that it's important to recognize the impact that dolls have had on the culture. And regardless of whether you like them or not, you have to at least admit that they've really shaped the minds of so many people, and they still continue to this day play a very large influence in the fashion industry. And that's my plug for doll-themed Met Gala. So anyway, that's all I have to say about this. Actually, that's not all I have to say. An extended version will be going up on my podcast on Wednesday. Highbrow. Make sure to check it out. But for now, I'll leave you all, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!